Welcome to the Republican Professor. Today we have Dr. Paul Potter with us, Ph.D., uh, longtime professor at various places, and retired tenure professor, and also a retired minister.
True.
And he's joining us from his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yes.
We're happy to have you. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Dr. Lucas Mather.
So we had a different Paul coming on after Easter. I thought that was his. Oh, you know what? That's the Paul from the Bible. Never mind.
if you
He had
can
an
get
associate's from Tarsus Community College. Oh, okay. Well,
okay.
anyway, Paul.
Yeah.
Start from the beginning. Let's get a sense for the overview of your life, the major life events, so that people can have the whole thing in mind. And then when you
All
start
right.
filling in the details. So
Okay.
you were born, let me guess, I'm just going to throw a location out there, Long Beach, California.
Yep. The
Is that a
left
pretty
coast.
good? Okay, that's a pretty good guess. Awesome.
Yep.
My second guess was going to be Short Beach. So I'm glad
No, it's long.
I rolled the dice and it was Long Beach. Okay.
There you go.
So, but you didn't stay there very long because it was the Great Depression. It was 1938. A war was on the horizon with Japan and Germany, and we won that war, thank God.
Mhm.
You found yourself growing up where? Did you grow up somewhere? Where did you graduate from high school?
Always kind of referred to my early childhood as being a Navy brat. We traveled all
Okay.
over the United States with Dad in World War II.
How many
After the
high
war,
schools did you go to?
we settled in Dallas, Texas,
Hmm.
and I went to 2 high schools.
Okay.
I feel very strongly about technical schools,
Mm-hmm.
and we could spend time on that. But I went
What
to a technical high school in downtown Dallas.
is that where you graduated?
Nope. After 2 years there, we moved as a family,
Uh-huh.
and I was in a fairly new school called South Oak Cliff, and that's where I
Okay.
graduated. I actually dropped out of school for 1 semester. During my school years, I skipped a year, dropped out of school, but still ended up graduating with my graduating class.
Oh, wow.
Got out of high school,
What, so tell me what the town was.
Dallas,
Oh, in the city of Dallas.
Dallas,
Okay.
and a suburb of Dallas is
I've
Oak
heard that
Cliff,
town.
and that's where I ended up in South Oak Cliff. Had 4 scholarships offered to universities, but we did not have a uh, history of colleges and universities in our family. And I really didn't appreciate what scholarships meant. So
Mm.
instead of going to college right away, I went into the Air Force for the next 4 years. But that was good. I wanted to be a pilot, wanted to fly. When I went into a basic training, they did the evaluation, shoved across the desk to me my choice of Air Force specialty codes. And my very first choice was something you'd be familiar with. It was a language school in Monterey, California. But got called home on emergency leave. We had a death in the family. When I got back, I found out that they had filled that school and I was number 8 on the overage. So instead of going to language school, I went to personnel school and became a clerk typist. Isn't that exciting? Somewhere when
Very, very exciting.
I got when I was in my early 20s and I was stationed at headquarters 12th Air Force, which was an off-campus installation in Waco, Texas. And I was doing officers.
What part of Waco?
It would be on
I'm
the
kidding. I'm kidding.
west side of town.
I'm
It
kidding.
was okay.
It's so small,
Yes,
it would stick out.
And James Connolly Air Force Base at that time was an active installation, but we were not on the base. So I got
Oh.
off base separate rations and
Ooh,
took
you're
the
lucky.
officers. Yep. Took
You
the
were
officers.
lucky. You didn't have to
Yes,
go
yes,
to the
yeah.
chow hall.
Yes. Yes. Got
What year was that?
wow. This would have been
60s?
48,
Late 50s?
56, 57, 58.
Okay.
And
Eisenhower was president.
mhm. Took the officers candidate school test,
Mhm.
placed very highly in that. But then during the physical, the last test on the physical was eye exam, and my eyes didn't pass the qualifications to be a pilot. So I applied for an early release because I didn't want to stay in the Air Force as an officer and not have my wings and be a pilot. And got on the same day I got my acceptance to officers candidate school, I also got my acceptance for an early release to go to college.
Okay.
Moved back to Dallas.
Did you go to the same college for all 4 years?
Nope.
Hopped around for that too?
Went to Arlington State College. I had taken some courses in the Air Force at Baylor, Armed Forces Institute. So I ended up with about 30 semester hours about the year after I was out of the Air Force. And then went a totally different direction. Went to a trade school, got the Federal Communications license for radio engineer, broadcasting diploma, and got into radio and eventually television.
If you had to just tell me what your job in the Air Force was, you had to pick it. What was it? What was it?
Flew a desk.
So answering phone calls, typing correspondence.
I had officers' records. I had about 3,000 officers' records. One of the most interesting was Colonel Chuck Yeager. And he was the
What was his
Bellac
social
one.
security number? Let me get that down.
Mine? 463-527-028.
No, his.
His? I don't remember his.
Well, we have yours now, so.
There you go.
Chuck
It's
Yeager, wow. How come you had his record?
He was a squadron commander in California, I think Luke Air Force Base. And he had been assigned there.
That Air Force Base is named after me.
Yeah, there you go. I didn't know that.
Mather Air Force Base is too, but you know, I don't know why they didn't just have one named Luke Mather Air Force Base. I don't understand it. Everybody mispronounces my.
Did they have a J? Did they have a J?
I don't, that's a good question. I don't know. They don't read very carefully, I guess. But
no, they don't.
They were so desperate to have another name. And so anyway, but I'm happy to serve my country.
Thank you.
Chuck Yeager, did you ever meet him?
Never met him personally.
Okay.
Was quite, he was held back from getting his star because upper command said, well, you've done all these wonderful things in research, but you've never commanded a unit. And that's how he ended up with a squadron that he was commander of. So it was when I got out of the Air Force and I saw the commercials he was doing for a battery company. I don't remember which battery company. And he was introduced as General Chuck Yeager. I said, yay, he made it.
All right. So you graduated undergrad from what university? What's college?
Finally went back to school when I was 29 and went to a community college, brand new systems that were starting up across the country. And Dallas County Community College, got an associate's degree, went to a Southern Methodist University in Dallas, right across from town from the community college.
Where the George Bush Library is, George W.
Yes.
Bush.
And got 2 degrees there, got a Bachelor of Fine Arts and Master of Fine Arts in broadcasting and film.
Oh, wow. So you spent quite a bit of time at Southern Methodist.
2 years, wearing several hats, one full-time academic and full-time in broadcasting, and also part-time doing productions for an audiovisual firm.
Now, an MFA, did you say it was an MFA?
Yes.
An MFA, for those who don't know, it's not a cuss word. It's
No,
a Master of Fine Arts, and that's a terminal degree, as I
it
recall,
is.
right? Okay.
It is.
So that that's a can you explain what a terminal degree is to people?
You've achieved the pinnacle within a discipline and in the fine arts, not necessarily wanting they do have doctorates now, but at
Yeah.
the time that was a concentrated degree in one area. And that's why I liked the degree program at SMU. The bachelor's degree had literally 60 hours in my field. And then plus the Master of Fine Arts was, and I was very fortunate. I already had a professional background. And so I was doing the syndicated radio program that represented Southern Methodists across the nation for recruiting purposes.
That's cool.
And then I got a grant to do a student recruitment film for the university, which counted as my master's thesis.
How did you get interested in fine arts? What was it? Was it something in your childhood?
As a kid, doing some drama work while I was at church in Dallas, and then in the Air Force itself. Well, we could get off on a lot of tangents here, Lucas. You've already known that from previous conversations with me. I had a strong interest in scouting that was non-traditional, and that was the American Indian. Spent a lot of time up in Oklahoma and here in New Mexico with Kiowas and the Comanches and the Pueblo Indians, studying their dances and stories. And when I got in the Air Force, I was invited to be a member of Tops in Blue, doing entertainment and Indian dancing. And after I got out of the Air Force, I did some of the opening advertising for Six Flags Over the Texas as an Indian costume. Here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Al Mamade, a well-known Native American artist, and his son, Pulitzer Prize-winning writer and professor in Scott Mamade, he asked me to do the beaded headband for his war bonnet that he exhibited at Gallup Intertribal. So being non-Indian and being involved in Indian stuff, I was invited by Disney to come out and be a part of Disneyland in the early days and be in their Indian village. So preparing to do that. And they said, "What tribe are you a member of?" And I said, "Dutch, English, Scott Irish." No Indian blood in me at all. So that short circuited that. They offered a job as a gunfighter and I wasn't interested. Could have been in part of your early gun owners association in California if I'd have done that, maybe.
So what year was the Disney thing?
That was before college and university. So that would have been,
That's your 20s.
yeah, I was in my 20s, mid 20s.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, went back to
So
college,
wait,
university, got those
so they
degrees
thought you were an Indian, and that's why they brought you out.
from the pictures. Yeah.
So
Got you off track.
that's how you got interested in fine art, was the Indian stuff?
Yeah, I was good at beadwork and design and dancing and performance, and it was the costumes and the stories that appealed to me, telling a story, entertaining folk.
Yeah.
And,
So that's interesting. I didn't know that angle that you had for fine art.
Yeah.
That it was actually the Indians that helped you out with that.
So
all right. So in other words, you got all the way to Disney, and then you were racially discriminated against.
I was.
Lost a job because of your race.
But they offered an alternative. I could be a gunfighter.
White supremacy.
Yeah.
That good old white supremacy. Yeah, the gunfighter, because people with guns are from England.
Interesting.
I'm trying to track that, but anyway, okay. That's awesome. That's interesting. That's very interesting. So, okay, so you tell us about after Southern Methodist University. You got
Okay.
you have your MFA. What next?
MFA. Uh, Back then, job searches were considerably different than today. I just started calling schools within a 50-mile radius of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Texas Christian University, Arlington State College, and others. And University of North Texas was looking for somebody as an adjunct. And you've done a lot of adjunct work. So I was still working in broadcasting in the Dallas market. Denton was 30 miles away. And so I accepted a 2-semester slot as, and when they hired me, instead of putting it as an adjunct, they put me as a guest lecturer, which paid more and it was a better position. And I found out that North Texas at the time was starting a program, a Ph.D. And it was I didn't know at the time, but I was in the initial cohort of a college Ph.D., college teaching. So you would get half of your hours, semester hours in education designed toward college teaching and half of your hours in your discipline. Well, after the first
And the
year,
discipline was,
the discipline was going to be speech communication and drama,
gotcha.
but with an emphasis, a strong skew toward radio, television, and film. Interesting thing happened at the end of the first year. The Washington Senators baseball team was moving to Dallas and becoming the Texas Rangers. Bill Mercer, who was on faculty at North Texas, had been doing play-by-play for a team called the Dallas Cowboys on the weekends. Well, he applied for and got the position as the announcer for the Texas Rangers. He could not do the Texas Rangers and travel with them and also continue on faculty at North Texas. So I slipped from being an instructor into being, from being a guest lecturer to being an instructor in the Department of Speech, Communication, and Drama. They wanted me to develop the programming in radio, television, and film. And in doing so, I got 2 credits. I would develop these programs and submit them to education as a model and get credit there and also get it in speech communication. So I kind of finagled a PhD.
Wow.
For
How long
for
did that
guys
take?
like you that do such awesome work and work so hard, I finagled mine. I got to be honest.
How long did that take?
I completed all coursework except one in the first 3 years. And that's
And then,
teaching full-time, working in broadcasting, and also studying.
well, how long did the whole thing take, including the dissertation?
The whole thing took 8 years
Mhm.
because at the end of 3 years at North Texas, I discovered I could not get tenure and be working on my doctorate there. It was called inbreeding. And I also had a senior faculty member. He says, Paul, with all due respect, you should have been hired in the professorial ranks instead of as an instructor because you have a terminal degree,
Yeah.
the MFA.
Yeah.
But I'd started working on the doctorate and they overlooked the fact that it was an MFA and they wouldn't give me tenure. So
Sorry to hear that.
well, it was good. It was one of God's things because I ended up
Why do you say that it was good and it was one of God's things?
okay, because I got this crumpled up piece of paper in my mailbox. And it was a job advertisement for Stephen F. Austin State University in East Texas. And down at the bottom of it, my department chair had written, they looked at your resume when they wrote this job description. I hope you don't leave us. Well, he did that at the same time I had gotten my, that I wasn't going to get tenure. And so I called Dr. Ramsey at Stephen F. Austin State University in East Texas. We had lunch at a Holiday Inn. And by the time I left the luncheon, I was hired as an assistant professor at Stephen F. Austin. And so the next semester I moved there and started teaching. And that was 6 years I spent there.
Do you remember what you had for lunch there?
Don't have a clue. It's now an apartment complex in Nacogdoches, Texas. But anyway, that's where the job was offered and I accepted.
Congratulations. And you spent 6 years there, right?
6 years, excellent years. I became a Christian while I was there.
Tell us about that. How did you become a Christian?
I grew up in church. Sometimes that can be deceptive.
What church?
Baptist, and most of my years were spent at First Baptist Church in Dallas, which at the time
Southern
was
Baptist?
Yeah, First Baptist was the largest Baptist church in the world. Dr. W.A. Criswell was my pastor.
No kidding. Wow, he's famous.
Knew me by my nickname and spent time visiting with him. I was also in scouting, Luke, and got my God and Country Award. He was my mentor for that when I was a teenager. I was there on the Sunday morning that Billy Graham joined First Baptist in Dallas because Billy said he needed a pastor, and he chose Dr. Criswell for his church and for his pastor.
I did not know that. So you went to the same church that Billy Graham went to?
When he was in town, because he did a lot of traveling, as you're well aware. Anyway, I grew up.
Well, did he live there?
No, he lived in North Carolina.
Gotcha. Okay.
Had an encounter with God when I was, this was 1974. The short story is I was becoming a very good Pharisee.
Can I just back up really quick? So when you grew up in church and stuff up to this time, you believed in God?
I did.
You believe God exists, so you weren't an atheist.
No.
But you're saying you were not a Christian.
I was not committed to Christ.
Were you Jewish?
Nope.
Muslim?
I was a religious person.
Okay.
Strong religious spirit, not a spiritual person. In fact, I was doing things in God's name. I was preaching. There was a period of time I produced the Baptist Hour for the Southern Baptist Convention.
As a non-Christian?
Non-Christian. But if you would have asked me, I'd have probably said, yes, I'm a member of a church. I'm Baptist.
Did you pray?
Went through the motions, the words. We can do the Lord's Prayer as part of the liturgy and really not believe in God himself.
Right.
I would say it this way. I think if I had stood before him, my judgment, I said, Lord, I would have done all these things in your name. And he would have said, depart from me. I never knew you. So it's that intimate relationship, committing your heart and soul in your deepest innermost being and having that faith in him that I had not had until I was 36 years old. So Nacogdoches was good for that. Conversion.
Conversion's a good thing.
Yep.
But the conversion though, I mean, what was there an event? What was it? Why then? Why there?
Okay. I'd been doing a lot of study, a lot of reading. The night before my conversion experience, I was reading Sheldon's In His Steps. And this is the book that originated the What Would Jesus Do? So all these people in this church some of them were taking a vow of, I would not do anything unless I would first ask, what would Jesus do? And the bishop came to town to see what was happening, the strange experiences at this church. And the night he went to his hotel, and this would be in the 1800s, no air conditioning, windows open, he's looking out over this rectangle. And there's a night watchman making his rounds, checking the doors, and the night watchman is singing, must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free? I closed the book about 2:00 in the morning. Next morning, got up early, went out and picked up the woman I was dating at the time, Tanya, and we went to early church.
Does your current wife know about this lady?
Yes, that's Tanya.
Oh, okay. All right.
She's fixing coffee behind me as we speak.
All right. I just want to make sure I wasn't causing any issues.
She's laughing at you. Anyway,
this is 1974 still?
74. And in 74, we went to early church because you get out of church early, right? Get it over with. And
That's one way to look at it. Wow.
George Dotson was preaching on Paul's thorn in the flesh. And it was aimed at me. How preachers sometimes can get very personal. So my name's Paul, and he was talking about Paul's thorn in the flesh. And I was strongly emotionally impacted by it.
Mhm.
We got up to sing the closing hymn.
Mhm.
And for those that may be listening, Baptists are prone to sing just as I am without one plea. And you sing it over and over again until someone finally comes forward to the altar in response.
Mhm.
And we stood up, and I had not heard it announced, but they started singing, "Must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free?" Same verse I'd closed on at 2:00 in the morning. And I was white knuckling the pew in front of me. And audibly in my spirit, I heard, "Paul, yield now, or I'll forever leave you alone." And with great emotion, I went forward, and tears and snot. And Brother George Dotson took me by the hand, and I could hardly say anything. I said, "I yield." We had little white cards that you filled out. And you had these places you could check off at the bottom: salvation, member of the church, baptism, various things.
Mhm.
But I didn't see yield on there, so I just wrote it in big letters across the face of the card. I yielded. They knew me as a professor in town. The preacher for the Baptist Hour that I had produced those programs some year before had preached in that church.
Mhm.
So this was kind of a big deal. Kind of some of the questions you're asking me earlier. What are you doing? Well, this is salvation. It's yielding. And I really grew to know in the next few months that was yielding my life to God, whatever He had in mind. A
I'm
side
still,
note on that.
I mean, this is all great and interesting. I am huge life event you're describing here.
Yes, it
And
is.
and my mind is stuck on, you went to bed at 2 a.m. and went to the early service. Because the
Mhm.
first time you said you went to the early services, I was like, well, I know what your Saturday nights are like. But
Yep.
no, I mean, did you stay up late on Saturday nights
That
typically?
one I did.
And
Because,
so did you just not need a lot of sleep?
oh, wow. Those years working in broadcasting, doing productions, going to school, teaching,
Mhm.
even at Stephen F. Austin, I was not only teaching full time and developing a program, had a very active schedule, had 3 labs connected with the 4 courses I was teaching, running the radio station and all. Yeah, sleep was minor. In fact, trying to think,
So
it
you were
was
sleep deprived.
during this time, I was anchoring the news at a local TV station about 20 miles away.
So you were sleep deprived. Would you say that that's a fair description of
Yeah,
those years?
when you're young, you just go for life. Now at my age, you got to have a nap.
Hmm. Well, some young people sleep a lot. They like
It's true.
they like to sleep. They sleep in.
Yeah, but I was
They stay up late, but you typically kids stay up,
goal oriented, so I had stuff to do and things to do, and couldn't
Okay,
linger in bed.
gotcha. So would you say you were an early riser every day?
I, it depended on the circumstances. I've done all night radio shows in Dallas,
Mhm.
where this broadcast we're doing this from Albuquerque. I was here back in the '60s, and had a morning radio show that we signed on at 4:53:30 in the morning. So
Yeah, that's rough.
yeah,
That's
you
really rough.
adjust. You adjust.
Now, what would you say to an atheist listening to this who says, that little experience that you had in that Baptist church, that was just sleep deprivation?
Okay. The reality of the years since then changed life, changed perspective.
Mhm.
I like to use this example, Luke, that you look at a lens on a camera. I worked with a fellow at SMU when we were doing the student recruitment film there. And we rented equipment from a In fact, they loaned it to us. And I asked them one time, I said, why do you loan this expensive equipment to college students? They said when they graduate, they're going to need equipment sometime and they have a contact with us. And this guy said he could take apart and put together any camera, any of the equipment except a lens. And those unique lens systems that now we're able to put in this little tiny device here. It's marvelous, the focus and the depth of field and all. And we do that with these things. And this just happened. I asked college students when I was teaching with it in Abilene, I said, have you ever seen a lake bed that dries up or a stock pond? And when I moved there, it was at the end of a 7-year drought. Yeah, I said, what happened to the fish? They die. I said, you mean you've never seen a fish grow legs as that pond was driving and start walking on land? No. I mean, even over a period of time? No. To me, evolutionary concepts and that there is no God and God is dead, there's such a marvelous creation that we're a part of. The eye, the ear, the body, that this thing has been created, the ability of you and I to communicate, the ability of somebody to create a device that here, me talking into a MacBook Pro and you sitting there in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, it's just,
Hold up here.
this did not just happen. And that morning when I was 36-year-old, I met the Creator, and when this vast universe that he takes a personal interest to address me by name, Paul, yield now. And that wasn't the first, that was the first of many occasions of having a conversation with him.
What do you feel like you were not yielding to before that?
Yielding my life, the totality of who I was. Jesus says, I've come that you might have life and you might have it more abundantly. I could say I've lived a good life, an exciting life. To meet someone like you because of someone like Lance Wallnau, that I met because of Graham Cook, that we met because God told us to sell everything and move to a place he would show us, and we moved to Alaska. So I had to meet you by leaving Dallas, Texas, and moving to Alaska to meet Graham, to meet Lance,
Yeah.
to recommend you. And the wonderful connections that he does, this life more abundantly. For Lance to tell me, as I've told you a number of times, write the book, write the book, write the book that God has given you. And that was 25 years ago. I've said 20 for a number of years, but I realized 25 years to finally write these 3 books.
Trying
in
to
the
show
last
the
6 months.
yeah, show the book.
Here you go. Yeah. It's in 3 parts. Climbing Mount Everest to accomplish your spiritual goals. I think it's an unusual format, Luke. It's got Mount Everest as the focus, but the jumping off part is that each one of the books has a memoir of my life. And then I accomplish your spiritual goals as a part of it. Part 1 being base camp is salvation, baptism, and communion. And then we go on from there.
Can you describe salvation for us? You say
Beautifully
the
portrayed in,
the acknowledgement says, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who gave himself for me. Can you explain that to someone who doesn't know what that means?
well, the Bible starts in Genesis with creation in the Garden of Adam and Eve. And they didn't murder, they didn't steal, they questioned God. And what we've done ever since is question God. And Jesus gave us an answer. God incarnate, indescribable, inexplicable. You've had guests on here before and will in the future that can describe it. I'm a simple man, simple approach to the scripture. But he said, I come that you might have life. How did he do that? Because we were born into death. separated from God, separated from our Creator. And the only way we could be joined to him and be a member of his family is by a blood birth. John does such a wonderful job of describing that in the first chapters of John, when Jesus says, you must be born again. Nicodemus says, how can this be? Because what he had done in the Jewish world is the ultimate birth. He had been born into the Sanhedrin. Not only had he had this bar mitzvah, become a man, married, business, but born into the Sanhedrin. Do I have to be born again? How can this be? And Jesus said, unless you're born of the Spirit. And the spirit of the man is what lives on. What I have here and what you're looking at and what I'm looking at you is like this computer. It's the hardware. What drives this computer? It's the software. So within us, we have this soul, or Watchman Nee calls that the mind, the will, the emotions, the intangibles. Well, what's my power source? So I got hardware, I got software, but what's my power source? You can be plugged into that which is evil, or you can be plugged into that which is the power of God. And the Holy Spirit is the power of God. And once we plug into that, then we have access to the creator of the universe, and he calls us family. And John says, you have the power to become sons of God. Well, for the women in our audience, what that means is not only are you born into the family, but you're born into Christ himself, and Christ comes to live within us. And what the Father sees is his Son, and that's why he calls us sons of God. But we are called joint heirs with Jesus Christ. What? Because of what he purchased for us on the cross. We're told in Isaiah that by his stripes we're healed. Prophetically, then we see Christ in Mel Gibson's film, The Passion of the Christ, being beaten to a point that in a men's meeting recently, when we were seeing that scene, one of the men objected, a pastor. He said, why are we looking at this violence? Well, we're looking at the violence because of that, what Jesus experienced on the cross, we have the opportunity to accept that and be born again. And it's that yielding. It's that yielding to him, not my will, but your will be done.
So that Sunday morning, go back to that Sunday morning,
Yeah.
when you went forward,
Yeah.
you knew all of that you just said, but there was something in your spirit that was suddenly responsive.
Yeah.
To that in a new way, in a personal way.
Yeah.
That you'd never experienced that before. Is that right?
That's true.
Okay.
Standing at the door, Jesus knocks.
Mhm.
That famous picture, it says in Revelation, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man open the door, in that famous picture, he's standing at a door and there's no doorknob. We have the doorknob. We can open that door and let him in.
Gotcha.
And so there was two things that happened that day. He came into my life, but I also stepped over into his world as well.
Was there a Kleenex there so you could take care of the snot and stuff? Just, I think there's someone wondering that.
I think I reached into my back pocket of that suit that I had on that day and took out that handkerchief and just picked it up.
That's back when people had handkerchiefs.
Yeah.
You're dating yourself, Paul.
I know.
You're dating some.
Hey, 83 years old this year.
83?
83 now, 84 in May.
Seems like just last year you were 82.
I know. It goes by quickly.
You've had a long career.
Yeah.
So now you're at Stephen F. Austin. What happened after that? Where'd you go after that?
Okay. Two things happened there. One, right after Anya and I got married.
Congratulations.
We lived in an old farmhouse out on the edge of town.
That's cool. Did you have a barn?
No, but we had 2 picnic tables covered by a wisteria vine that was about 100 years old.
Wow.
Curving driveway around the house,
Oh, that's cool.
big front porch, 2 fireplaces.
Ooh. Now,
It was,
oh, now you're
it was
talking.
nice. It was nice.
Now you're talking.
Now, let me ask you this. On this conversation with you this morning, have we talked about the pruning, the plowing, and the transplanting?
You're getting to that. That's what you're getting to.
All right.
Okay, so yeah. So you had to
Living on
move.
an old farmhouse.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
early in the morning. It's dark. I'm driving someplace. It's not to the university. I'm thinking it may have been to Austin on university business. I don't remember. Driving along, it's dark. It's the piney woods of East Texas. And I hear God audibly in my spirit. I can't explain how that happens or what it sounds like, but I hear his voice. And he says, if you're truly a tree planted in my garden, do I have permission to prune you? And I said, yes. We'd had a couple of conversations earlier in the previous years. And I said, yes. But then I got this shh, kind of like you're speaking too quickly. And he showed me that, and this is in John 15, where it says that the Lord is the true vine and we're the branches. And in order to be fruitful, the gardener wants to sometimes prune back that plant. And where you live in California, I'm sure you've seen vineyards where after the growing season, they radically prune them. They cut them back so they can be more fruitful. And he showed me that to the plant, that limb is alive. It's fruitful. It's bearing fruit. It's got sap running through it. And he wants to cut it off. And it can hurt in our real lives. And I told him yes. Long pause. And he said, if you're truly a tree planted in my garden, do I have permission to plow the ground where you live? Well, this was a lovely old farmhouse out in the country, fruit trees around it, the wisteria vine over the picnic tables in the back, a place where you could go out and have a picnic. But he shows me when you start plowing the ground and pulling up the weeds and taking the clods of dirt and pulverizing it and taking rocks and throwing it away and just having good, clean, healthy dirt for the plant to grow in, you don't want to have a picnic out there anymore. It's just dirt. And I gave him permission to plow the ground where we lived. Long pause. And then he comes back and he says, if you're truly a tree planted in my garden, can I move you wherever I want? Can I transplant you? And he showed me that the tree, a plant being transplanted, can be killed by a gardener that doesn't know what they're doing. The tree being transplanted and the root structure being balled up, it can lose all of its leaves.
Yeah.
And he showed me that, and I gave him permission to move us wherever we want. We moved shortly after that while I'm finishing my doctoral dissertation for my degree at North Texas to an air-conditioned home owned by a builder, and it was a display home. Finished the doctorate, and then we moved and it got tenure at the university, and we moved to my wife's childhood dream home, a place she had seen since she was a very young child. And it was a large place, beautiful wraparound porch, 3 fireplaces, beautiful place.
You're saying that she had seen this home with her
All
eyes.
years growing up. Yep.
So she'd always looked at that house and said, I want to live there.
Yep.
Okay.
So,
I just was trying to distinguish that from like some kind of dream house that she came up with in her dreams or something. Okay. So it was real house.
people
She drove
familiar with
by.
Nacogdoches, and I think some of them are going to be watching this. It's listed in one of those historic homes built by a famous builder, all of that. And we had the opportunity to live in it for a year.
That's cool.
Then, wow. Why would you leave tenure? Why would you leave your wife's childhood dream home? Why would you leave family, your church, all of that? It's hard to explain, but we did. We moved to Cincinnati, Ohio to develop the television program for Xavier University. It was to be the chair position in a year. but I was not to tell Father Flynn.
Were you unhappy at Stephen F. Austin?
No, we really weren't.
Okay.
Really
No personnel issues that were a problem?
personnel.
No colleagues that were giving you a hard time?
Nope. It was a good
Students were
decision.
okay?
What was okay?
The students were okay?
Oh, yeah. Got some
Okay.
of them that were, some of them I'm still in contact with. Some of them have been very successfully on the international scene and national scene. And one of them we even had lunch with over the Christmas holidays recently.
Were the summers too hot?
Hot and humid.
Okay.
When we
So
talk about
I'm
moving
trying
back to Texas,
to
which,
think of
which we hope
Ohio.
to in
I've
about
never
a
been
year.
to Ohio, so I don't really know. My guess is there's 4 seasons there. The winters are cold
Yep.
and the summers can get pretty hot, I
Yep.
think. I'm pretty sure. So, okay, so you're saying this was a spiritual move
Yep.
that you can't explain.
Can't explain.
Okay. You just had a certainty that you were supposed to move to Ohio.
Yep. I use the term knocking on the door, which is another term for sending out applications. I knocked on the door.
You wait,
Uh,
hold on. You were sending out applications?
mhm.
Don't you think that that's a sign that you were unhappy at Stephen F. Austin?
Discontent, different word.
Discontent. Okay. Tell me the difference between those two things.
Unhappy would be, there's circumstances that you weren't happy with.
Yeah, okay.
Discontent was you were always looking for something new. What's over the
Uh,
horizon? What's around the mountain? I guess I've used
yes.
the term in my career, a gypsy scholar, a scholar that gets in my wagon and always hooks up the horse and see what's next. A pioneer. I was good at developing programs in radio, TV, film. So much so that while I was at Xavier of Ohio, I got contacted to be representative for the colleges and universities that were negotiating with the cable companies that were applying for access to Cincinnati and the surrounding communities. Being on that cable consortium committee, I got offered a job, and I found out later it's called Rent an Academic. So Warner Communications hired me to be their executive producer to start up the cable division in Cincinnati, Ohio. So I wore two hats, teaching at Xavier and also executive producer for Warner Communication.
So would it be fair to say that moving to Ohio was mainly for a private position and incidentally to teach? Or what were you excited about moving? Was it to teach, or was it to be working for Warner, or was it to be
The teaching came
teaching?
first, and
Okay.
it was to develop two things. It would have been an administrative position, being chair of the department.
And that's exciting to you?
It was at the time a challenge. I
Okay.
wanted to be in charge instead of being dictated to. I wanted to manage the position.
Gotcha.
It was a Jesuit school.
Was it more money?
Not much. Not much.
And I'm trying to think of, it would be the cost of living is more expensive in Cincinnati.
Actually, no,
Really?
because it was becoming the Rust Belt.
Oh,
One out of every 5 homes was on the market.
oh.
We ended up living in a couple of wonderful homes.
Mm.
And the mandatory retirement age for Jesuits then was 65, and our department chair was 64. So I was being hired to take his place, but don't tell him. And the dean who hired me said, that position is yours next year. But the Jesuits changed retirement age to 70. The dean accepted a position somewhere in California. And so my promise of a promotion was gone. I had accepted the job wearing 2 hats with Warner Communication. And my senior vice president overspent his budget. They'd never had an executive producer in their cable division. And so New York cut the position over the Christmas holidays. And so I was no longer going to be chair of the department. I was no longer going to be working for Warner. And I started knocking on doors. And that's when the opening came at the University of Oklahoma.
Hold on. How long were you in Ohio?
3 years.
Okay. All right.
So this could fit in the story if we go long enough. 6 years at Stephen F. Austin, 3 years at Xavier. I moved to the University of Oklahoma, get called in the process of moving there by the new director of the School of Journalism, asked to be her assistant. So I came in as assistant director of the School of Journalism.
You worked for a woman
Yeah, well, she's one of the best bosses I ever had. She
at
was
the
from
time?
Australia. Yeah, she was awesome.
Now, wait, hold on. So
Yeah.
you're saying you worked for a woman and you didn't feel angry about it back then?
Absolutely not. When you have a good boss, it doesn't matter what their gender is.
Mind blown
She was a
for all
good,
these great inflated kids out there. Okay.
good boss.
Just
When
just
she
curious.
calls
That
you
was in
with
the
an
80s.
Australian accent, and she calls Paul, would you
Who-
be my assistant?
Who was the president at the time? Reagan?
No,
Carter?
president of the U.S. or president of the university? Good golly, I forget his name.
This would have been 80s, right?
This is the guy that moved.
Help us with the timeline here.
What? Pepperdine. He moved Pepperdine out to the coast.
Banowski?
Banowski.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was president.
Well,
he left on
he
the day
died
I
recently.
arrived. He left on the day he arrived, had his jacket over his shoulder. We were walking across campus. And I said, why did you leave the day I arrived? He says, I don't know. I just got an offer from California. So he had left Pepperdine and gone to the University of Oklahoma.
So you knew Bill Banowski?
Yeah, about that long. And then after he accepted the presidency of the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, that's why he was leaving, he applied to fill his old position at the University of Oklahoma, and he came back.
Okay, go back to what year this was, though. This is what year was that? Was this the 80s?
You're good on dates. I'm not. This would have been 80s. Yeah.
Okay. So now,
80s.
how long were you at Oklahoma?
Okay.
Let me guess. 3 years,
Nope.
6 years.
Nope.
Okay.
I took their television operation. Okay. I came with a professional background in radio, TV, film. The local cable people, which I had an experience with now, had been wanting the university to do programming on their cable for a number of years, and they couldn't get it together. So what I did is got cable, university, and brought them together. And the second semester, we went on the air live every weekday morning at 7 a.m. with the newscast. Bill Banowski pulled the switch that we fabricated and made a big deal out of it.
Hold on one sec. I got to stop you there.
Okay.
There are some people that are waiting for the number of years that you were there, and they're not able to take in this information. Okay, so 2 years. Gotcha. And so did you have a woman boss the whole time?
Yes.
Okay.
And
you were not bitter and angry?
No.
Okay.
And I ran the radio station, a television operation, and a school in southern Missouri. I'd have to go back and check notes on this. Wanted to develop a multi-county, two-way interactive educational system, which I have some notes here. It'd be fun to get into at some point in time with you. What Peter Drucker was supposing that the educational system would eventually be transmitting content differently, not building bricks and mortars, but using satellites and delivery systems in a different way. That's what that school wanted to do up in Missouri. So I drove up. By the time I left, the president had offered me more money, full professorship, which I did not have at the time. I was an associate, full professorship to develop their television operation. And he had asked me, he says, how long will it take to do this? I said, you already have the basics. To have it fully functional, it would take about a year. And There would be some things we would need to tweak, but in a year we could be up and running. As I'm driving back to Norman, Oklahoma, University of Oklahoma, I'm thinking, I spent 6 years at Stephen F. Austin. I spent 3 years at Xavier. I've just spent 2 years at the University of Oklahoma. And I told him I could do that in a year. My prayer became, dear Lord, what do you want me to do? What's next? Because 6, 3, 2, 1, what's next? I ended up quitting university life totally, and I went into the insurance and investment business for 6 years. Became a vice president of insurance, hired about 200 people, trained them in insurance sales. And that was the next phase of my life.
Okay. What you were getting promoted this whole time
Yep.
in academics, right? It's not that
Yep.
you were going sideways. You were going up.
Yep.
And then you got a full professor for 1 year. Is that right? In Missouri?
Offered.
Offered. Okay, you didn't take it.
Did not take it.
Okay, I gotcha. So from Oklahoma, and the University of Oklahoma is in, what state is that in?
Oklahoma.
Okay.
Just
So
south of Kansas, north of Texas.
so it's in Oklahoma.
Yep.
And you were there for
Total of 3 years.
3 years.
University.
And you all of a sudden wanted to work in insurance all of a sudden?
It's an answer to prayer. You know, God, what's next?
Did you just want more money, or what was it?
It's again discontent. It's hard to explain.
Well, can I ask you,
what are my discontent? Anyway,
the winner of Our Discontent was
Yeah.
written by John Steinbeck.
yes. So it was discontent.
Mhm.
I can't explain it. I've had people that have stayed at one job all their life,
Mhm.
one home, retired from a position.
Some
That
people are like
is-
that. Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that with my friends that grew up in a military family, they move more.
And I guess it's
And I grew up in I grew up in the same house for 18, well, not 18 years, but I went K through 12 in the same house.
Hmm.
And so I know what it's like to have roots in the same neighborhood and have these memories. And I'm not I just think it's an interesting aspect. I wonder how much of the military background that you had, because your dad retired from the military, is that right?
No, he left. He was a chief petty officer, and
Was he in the military when you graduated high school?
no,
Okay.
he got out shortly after World War II.
Oh, okay. But you moved around a lot, did you say? Because you said you were a
We did.
Navy brat for a
We
while.
did
Okay.
California, Brooklyn Naval Yard, Miami. His
May-
plane, his ship had been hit by a Japanese suicide plane in the Pacific, and we went back to Oregon. So it was all four corners of the United States.
Well, there are people that just seem to have discontent.
Yeah.
Like they will. And it's not necessarily military. It's just like I've got friends that had a really nice spread in the Rocky Mountains, and they just upped and moved to the East Coast.
Hmm.
And it's, it would have been a nice place for them to grow up, for their kids to grow up, but they left. and I think it's because the guy, my friend, has discontent. He wants something new. That's what he wants. And so it's interesting. What causes the discontent?
pioneering spirit.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. Yeah, the pioneers were definitely like that. They had to be.
Yeah.
How could you not be that way?
See, I was in the early years of broadcasting
Mhm.
when the transition was made to disc jockeys.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
early experience in television, anchoring the news,
Yes.
that sort of
There's a
stuff.
lot of changes going on in those years. Wow.
There were.
Jeez.
And it was interesting the period of time from leaving University of Oklahoma,
Mhm.
which I was real good in analog technology,
Mhm.
uh, editing and all that. Editing was my forte. But then when we went in the insurance business, then we ended up going through a series of events to Alaska for 4 years. That was the transition from analog to digital. I miss that.
Gotcha.
I am not that good at the digital technology.
Okay.
Understand the concepts of producing and directing,
Yes.
but the actual technical aspects of it. And that was good because we had, in the professional world anyway, the engineers that could do that. I
Mhm.
had an engineer license, but I had not kept current with the transitions.
Now, you become a vice president of insurance, and then you go back into teaching, right?
I had people working for me in the Dallas Fort Worth area. I was working out of Oklahoma City when I started
Mhm.
and working directly with the national sales director who was my mentor. And one of the things I was good at in the insurance business is teaching the fast start schools, doing the recruiting, teaching goal setting. I guess I've been a goal setter ever since I was a Boy Scout as a teenager, because to achieve the ranks in scouting, to achieve the merit badges, you have to set goals and achieve them. And I've always been good at goal setting, good at helping kids uh, in setting up their degree plans in colleges and universities, asking the questions. Okay, and you and I've had this conversation for a number of years. Uh, about goal setting, about writing the book, about achieving certain goals and things in your life.
We're leading up to write the book that God gave you.
Exactly, but what happened is I moved to Dallas, and there's Tanya was on a trip to Georgia, came back on the tour bus. She was with some of the partners in our business. I had heard in my spirit about the night or two before she got back, it's time to move to Texas. She got off of the tour bus, and one of the first, I said, "How was the trip?" She says, "We've been talking about us moving to Texas." And we had some people working in the business in Texas. We had some very, very good friends from when we had first got married living in the Dallas Fort Worth area. We went down and visited them, visited their church, visited them, and through a series of events, we moved to Dallas Fort Worth. Lucas, I don't know how to explain this to your audience, except all of a sudden, everything I was good at, setting goals, recruiting, developing a market, I couldn't do anything. Absolutely dead in the water. If I'd have been a sailing craft, I'd have been in dead waters, nothing. And I remember Tanya going out of town, visit family, me standing at one of those old remotes that you had on TV that you would go across and choose a channel. And I'm just diddling with it. Dear God, what are you doing? And he said, "Do I have your attention?" And it was like, "Yes, sir," but nothing except this void. And I'm walking across the church parking lot where we're going a couple of days later. And I can take you just about to that spot, even though that church has closed its doors now. I can take you to the spot where this is years later from the pruning, the plowing, and the transplanting. He said, "And," I mean, why start with "and"? But I heard in my spirit so strong, "and the pruning is seasonal." At that time, I wasn't making any money. And I had some residuals and insurance, but wasn't making any money because I wasn't out selling. I went to work as a telemarketer. I made a discovery. You can't go in and get a job as a telemarketer, being a former professor, being a Ph.D. You just tell them you're a teacher looking for extra money. Oh, teachers are always looking for extra money. So I telemarketed for a year. I couldn't even
I
get
think
it.
I missed something.
Okay.
So I'm tracking with you. You were vice president insurance.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you're telemarketing.
Yep.
I missed that guy. I missed that.
We
I don't
moved to Dallas.
understand.
We moved to Dallas Fort Worth. I was opening up a branch of the company. I
Okay.
couldn't do anything.
Were you
Nothing
still
happened.
vice president at the time?
Yeah, and I had some residual income. I just started to hit that power curve of income.
Maybe I don't understand what it means to be a vice president. That's not a salary position.
No, it was not. It
Oh,
was
that's the piece I was missing. That's what
commission,
I was missing. Okay, sorry.
commissions and overrides.
Ah, all right. Okay,
I was getting
I was
override,
missing that. Okay, vice
and
president sounds like it's a salary position to me.
it does sound good, doesn't it?
Well, it sounds like a salary position
It does. It
to
does.
me. I mean, these kind of words, they don't really mean much to me, but I'm interested in what's going on in your spirit. And did you feel like God was growing you this whole time, your whole career? And if so, what were those growth points? What were you,
In,
how were you
in
growing as a
Ecclesiastes,
person?
in Ecclesiastes, it talks about the seasons. I think this was a season of pruning, a season of reevaluation, of redirection, and being
What's
sensitive.
getting pruned though? Because when the pruning happens, something gets cut and then something else grows.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking about.
What was getting cut was the pursuit of the income, the pursuit of building a business in insurance and investment strategies. What was being reestablished is a spiritual growth that, as I knocked on doors, I got a 1-year temporary appointment, 90 miles from home. So driving there in the mornings, teaching, coming back, stopping off at a community college, Tarrant County Community College, teaching there at night, and trying to find out what God's doing. So I was spending my days driving, teaching, coming back, teaching, long days. And at the end of that year, it was a 1-year appointment, temporary appointment. Tanya ended up working full-time at her church. I was looking around for something more than that 1-year appointment. And I got a full professorship, chair of the department at Angelo State University, which was a 5-hour drive from home. Tanya had
Now
just,
being chair, is that still like impressive to you at this point? Or because it just seems like more work to me. I don't know why anybody would want to be chair.
you get reduction in course time. You get to choose your schedule. You get to schedule yourself working summers, so you got a full-time job, more income. You have control over your life. You're not under the thumb of a chairperson. And
did you like driving? Is that why you took that job? Did you take that job?
I took the job. I asked
5
God,
hours? That's 10 hours.
why in the world would he give me a job that was 5 hours away from home?
Was it,
And
so
I
it's
ended
5
up
hours one way?
one way. I got an apartment. I was home on weekends. I asked God why I was going to be away from Tanya 4.5 days a week,
Okay.
driving 5 miles, 5 hours,
Mhm.
having an apartment, good money, good position. And what
Well,
I
if you were
really
able to
felt,
afford 2 places of residence, it must have been.
it was, we moved out of the telemarketing income, let's say that. And I said, Lord,
It's a
why am I
state
doing this?
university.
Huh?
It's a state university. I've been there. I've been in the
You have been,
library.
Angelo?
Oh yeah, I've swam in that pool. I did a
All right.
lot of training in that pool there at Angelo State.
It's a nice little school.
Yeah, it
And
is a nice school.
I
In
had the
fact, I still have a library book accidentally that I,
second largest office on campus. Nice office, TV
okay.
set up in the corner. Had
Was
my
that
own
was
little
that
job
was that impressive to you at the time?
I think it was impressive to faculty and students.
Mhm. And that was important to you to have that?
Appearance has always been a part, I think,
Mhm.
of my life. Yeah.
Did you miss Tanya during the week?
We spent a lot of time on the phone.
Mm.
And after the first year, we took a vacation to Alaska to visit her sister.
Mhm.
And the second year I was there, we spent a lot of time talking about moving to Alaska. And I said, you'd move there in a moment, wouldn't you? And she said, yes. I said, why? She said, I got an awful lot of my daddy in me. Her dad had always been attracted to Alaska, but never went. Well, it ended up that her sister, Tanya's sister, moved to Alaska, and we visited them.
Mhm.
And
But go back, you're in San Angelo
yep,
working.
yep.
You have an apartment. It's a one-bedroom apartment.
Say again.
Was it a one-bedroom apartment?
Yep.
And how far away from campus was that apartment?
5 minutes.
Okay. Could you walk?
Walk it. Usually ran.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's when I
And
was younger and more energetic.
what time would you get up and what time would you go to bed?
I'd be there at 7 in the morning. I was
At
always
work?
I
Oh,
was always the first one in the office, and I
wow.
did have some night classes, so sometimes I was there till late at night.
You sound like a morning person.
Not anymore.
Okay, so where did you go to church during this time?
It was back in the weekends, back to the Dallas-Fort Worth area,
Okay.
and this was a non-denominational church.
Mhm.
Uh, had a lot of well-known people that came in and out of that church. My wife worked in a ministry school there.
Big
So
church?
people like, say again,
Big church?
about 1,500.
That's big. That's a mega church.
Yeah. Uh, James Robinson went there. Jack
What
Deere was connected with them.
what do you feel like God was doing in your spirit
When
during
I
this
first
time,
when I
and
first
how were
went to
you growing as a person?
when I first went to San Angelo, I said, Lord, why did you set up these circumstances? The thing that came to me was, I need to talk to you. I want to talk to you. And it took me, Luke, about 6 months to quieten down inside. Dudley Hall, a teacher, Bible teacher, used to use the term sitting down inside. We have what you've done work in the Asian world. I think they have a concept there called the drunken monkey that never shuts up. I call it the radio voice in our mind. You know, when you're trying to quieten down, you want to spend some time with God or Bible study or prayer or something. You got these thoughts that just all of a sudden flare up and your mind's busy, busy, busy. You try to concentrate on something and there take a flight. And it took me about 6 months to quieten down inside, turn off the car radio,
Mhm.
uh, turn off the television and the electronic stuff at the house, and just quieten down and listen to God. Out of that, we started talking more about Alaska. And I left the university after we hung out at a revival for 6 weeks one summer. And during that time, we both heard, sell what you have, move to a place that I'll show you. I'll tell you to move to the right or to the left when you get to the fork in the road. And I'll tell you when you get to the gates of the city.
When you say you hung out at a revival, were you going home at night?
This was during a summer.
So you stayed the night
No,
there at the revival?
no, no, no. It was morning sessions, evening
Okay, so you're
sessions.
living at home, but you're not. Okay. A lot of people, they don't know what a revival is. They don't know what that is. Is this like some
This,
kind of
this,
Coachella
this was this
thing
wasn't
going
your
on?
this wasn't your usual show up, have some songs, have a sermon, go home. It was an extended time of really getting into God's presence and hearing what He had to say.
Can
Out
I
of the,
can I notice a pattern here? It
yeah,
seems to me that the pattern is that God tells you where to move,
mhm.
but I'm trying to get at the deeper issue there of what is going on that requires a move? Why does God want you to move? There's something going on in the background there.
When
In the
we get,
depth of your heart, there's some ache or desire, something that God is asking you to move. But it's got to be more than just moving, right?
it's pursuit. Discontent yields to pursuing, satisfying, becoming content. There's an old song, "This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. Dear
Yep.
Lord, what shall I do?"
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of been the echo in my heart for a number of years. And when we tend to um, grow still, we get discontent, we tend to stagnate. And there's a number of references in the New Testament to stirring the waters. I think that's what God does. All of a sudden, you become content, you put down roots, the water grows still, it starts growing green scum on the top of it, and it needs to be stirred up. And for me, he's always broken up the end of that pond and get the water moving someplace. And
Gotcha.
for us, in blessed Tanya's heart, she has followed me all over the place,
Mhm.
and we sold everything, and we moved, not knowing where we would end up in Alaska, but we ended up moving to Fairbanks, Alaska, for 4 years. Got there and didn't know what we'd be doing, where we'd be staying. We house sat for 10 months at different places. You do not want to leave your house in Alaska, and people would leave, go outside, go to the vacation, whatever, and they didn't want to leave their house unoccupied. So we would house sit sometimes a week, 2 weeks. The most was 5 weeks. We did that for 10 months. So we got free room, utilities. Some of them said the pantry's yours, eat whatever you want. And I ran a church camp for the Presbyterians, church camp and retreat center, for 2 years. Tanya had had some connections with the church up there that we established ourselves in. The second year, end of the second year, the church merged with another church, and the pastor, she became the executive pastor's, or the senior pastor's executive secretary. And the pastor asked me to be the executive pastor doing the administration of the church.
Mhm.
And so we did that for a couple of years. This was the period of time I think it's very important spiritually in our life. It's when we met Graham Cook that I've mentioned. We've mentioned somebody that's been a connection in your life, Lance Wallnau. Kim Clement had a prophecy over our life because of Lance.
Wait, what was Lance doing up in Alaska?
We met him through Graham. We met in Alaska, but we actually met Lance over in Tennessee and Georgia at some group conferences.
Okay.
He had just become pastor of a church up in Rhode Island, and still working with his Fortune 500 companies. He did not have the prominence that he has now because of the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay, go back to Alaska. So I see where this is going.
Okay.
You're going to get discontented in Alaska. Is that right?
It was because of the church.
Okay.
I'm a developer. The camp that I had, I saw as being a great attraction for people from the lower 48.
Mhm.
We had a senior board member who only saw it being just for Fairbanks and the churches there.
Mhm.
He didn't want a big camp operation with people coming in from the lower 48.
What was it like living in Alaska?
4 very distinct seasons: June, July, August, and winter. It's like you mentioned earlier, the
Did you
heat.
like that?
We both enjoyed it, but it was time to move.
Really? You enjoyed the huge winter?
Mhm.
What did you like about it?
Well, you learn to dress in layers.
Yeah.
We bought a home that had a heated garage, so you could go out and get in your car and putter around.
Mhm.
It was unusual, is different. I mean, 35 degrees below zero isn't, this morning I got up here, it's 28 degrees. It's a little bit different when it's 50 degrees colder.
Were you into the outdoors? Did you like hunting? Did you go fishing?
No. we had,
We've
we had,
already established you're not an Indian.
and we had friends back in Texas that were hunters and fishermen.
Yeah,
And could
that's why
not
people
understand
like Alaska. Yeah.
why God would move us to Alaska, and I wasn't a hunter or a fisherman.
So what do you think? Why do you think he did move you to Alaska?
I think it was for some of the connections that we've had in you and I would not be here today if we hadn't moved to Alaska. Unless God had arranged it some other way.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you grew discontent with Alaska. What was the next move?
I think it was a God thing. Our church moved from being a prophetic emphasis to being a life group, home group emphasis. And when we moved into this life group emphasis, they were going to decentralize the church. And through a number of things that happened, it ended up that Pastor and I were going a different way. And so we said, okay, God, what's next? And it was to move back to Texas. But it took a 3-year journey to get back to Texas and to get to Hardin-Simmons University, where I ended up teaching.
It was a 3-year journey because you were walking.
Because there, where do you move? What do you do? What's the goal? What's the job?
So,
And
so you moved before having something in place?
Yeah.
Okay. You must have really wanted to get out of Alaska.
I even applied for jobs in Alaska, but no one wanted me.
Okay. Was that tough? How did you feel about that? Did you feel?
We surfed credit cards and got deeper and deeper in debt.
How did you feel about that?
It's the great big question mark when God has you in the wilderness. And I think that was the early stages of our wilderness experience. Not knowing
How long was that? 3
the
years?
wilderness, it was 20 years.
Okay, so you're including Hardin-Simmons in the wilderness
As
years.
part of that wilderness.
All right. Okay. All right. So that 3 years, where did you live?
We sold our home very quickly, and most of the furniture in it. We moved in with my wife's family in Palmer, Wasilla, Alaska, and I kept applying for jobs, nationwide in Alaska, and then finally we loaded up our 5-by-8-foot trailer and headed back off to Texas. And can we pause for just a minute or two?
Sure. I was going to ask you if you knew Sarah Palin. This is probably where you're going to tell me about Sarah Palin. Now, you were in Alaska. You hadn't left yet. You mentioned you were in for 3 years living on credit cards after leaving Alaska, but you wanted to say more about Alaska.
Yeah, a couple of things happened there. We really had some strong connections with ministries that were coming in and out of Alaska. And some of them we had known from our time in Texas and Tanya's relationship in the church there. Some of them we were introduced to in Alaska. One is a gentleman by the name of Graham Cook, who at the time was out of England. And he had some conferences, not only in Alaska with us, but in the lower 48. So we were on staff at our church, and we'd go on those conferences, some to Tennessee, some in Georgia. And it was at a meeting in Tennessee where a young man by the name of Lance Wallnau came in one night, and there had been a storm. He came in late, had a backpack, came in, didn't sit at the table where we were in a conference room, just kind of crashed against the wall. And we were introduced to this.
Was this during the time you lived in Alaska?
We were in Alaska. We were on a conference in Tennessee.
Okay.
And this was our first introduction to Lance Wallnau, a fairly new pastor out of Rhode Island, but had an extensive history working with Fortune 500 companies. And I have counted him since then as one of the top 2 teachers in 2 or 3 teachers that I've had in things spiritual of Christian nature. Lance, 2 things happened. One, in a subsequent meeting in Virginia Beach, Virginia, that he was there and I was for a conference on home cell group ministry. He introduced me to a guy by the name of Kim Clements, who's passed away now. Kim was a prophetic voice out of South Africa. Lance, at the end of a meeting one night, I'd already gone back to the van, going back to the hotel. And he came running out, Paul, I've done something I've never done before. And I said, what's that? He said, I asked him if he might have a prophetic word for you, and he does. Come on. And I walked in, and here's this guy with long hair. He had a long overcoat on. It's in the winter, and he's sticking his hand out at me. And he said, the brook has dried up where you are. The brook has dried up where you are. Prepare to pack your bags for Sarafeth. Summer's coming, and you'll flourish again. Well, we were already starting to feel this move away from Alaska. It's kind of been part of that whole thing of discontent. But here's a word that I think and interprets from the Lord that prepare to pack our bags. Okay, point 2. Guy by the name of
Did you trust him? Did you trust this Kim guy?
Yes, I did.
Why did you trust him?
Lance in his introduction. I had trusted Lance from the number of meetings that we had had in conferences, and it echoed my spirit. And unless someone's ever had experienced that, you can't explain it. It speaks spirit to spirit, and it's a confirmation word as well. Well, another fellow that we knew and who stayed in our home was Dr. Jack Taylor, another fellow that's passed away since then. We had known him from our days in Texas, in and out of the ministry of churches that we had been a part of. And I said, I struggled with churches. And he said, Paul, that's because you don't know the code. And I said, what code? He said, well, I'm going to write a book on it. He never did. Best I can determine is, maybe you would know this because you have a degree, a master's degree in Bible. He said, you don't have a degree in Bible. You've not gone to Bible school. Yeah, you've taken religious courses, but you haven't been tapped on the shoulder, knighted, as it were. You don't have the credentials of being a pastor. And unless you have that, unless you've been entered into the ranks of the Sanhedrin, unless you've been recognized as one of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, he said, you're not going to be accepted. He said, you got the wrong degree. A degree in communication and education isn't what the churches are looking for. And he prayed for me, sympathized with me, and that was it. The other one was a prophetic word from Graham Cook saying that I would head up a school of ministry. And I said, okay, and saw that as being a possibility. But again, I didn't have the credentials in Bible, but I did in education. But if you've studied the stuff enough, and I'm a good teacher, taking it and breaking it down into its fundamental parts and presenting it as a curriculum. And my emphasis on my doctorate was curriculum design. So taking a concept, breaking it down, and presenting it to an audience. Packaging the message, which is part of radio, TV, film. Well, it wasn't working. God, what's next? We moved in with family in the Palmer-Wasilla area. I don't know if it was before the break or not. You asked me about Sarah Palin. My brother-in-law, who was in education there, and my sister-in-law, he was a coach and he did a lot of work with recreation when she was the mayor. So he did know Sarah Palin. I never met her. We were looking for any employment that we could, Luke. We were looking in the lower 48, looking in Texas, looking in Alaska, looking wherever, couldn't find anything. We just packed up everything and moved back to Texas, which was home for my wife, home for me.
So how long were you in Wasilla again?
A few months.
Now, during this time, it sounds like this was a tumultuous time in Alaska.
It was.
And it feels to me like you're feeling held back in the church because of the degrees that you have or don't have.
Yeah.
And I think it feels to me that there was some feelings there that were painful.
Yeah. And in my books, the next to the last goal, spiritual goal that I list is walking in forgiveness. And sometimes when we're offended, when we're hurt, when positions are terminated for whatever reason, yeah, there's hurt, and it's difficult to walk in that forgiveness. And I think that's why when Peter asked the Lord, how many times should he forgive somebody? 7. And the Lord said 7 times 70. Well, that multiplication of forgiveness must be very important. Even so, the Lord puts that in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive those that sin against you, that trespass against you, so that we might be forgiven by our Father in heaven. It's a difficult requirement for the Christian walk to walk in forgiveness.
Do you think that forgiveness requires the person that the moral injury occurred from? Do you think that that person needs to ask for forgiveness before it's granted?
I think there's power in the word. And if I've offended someone, I want to apologize to them. And it may be real or imagined, but I still think it needs to be done that way. I know recently someone in our church was saying they had done something. And I says, well, good for you. I wish it would happen to me. And I actually sent them a text later. We exchanged messages. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't receive what you were telling me, something happening to you with more grace. And that grace is an interesting word. I've researched the word grace. Frequently, when people are defining grace, they use a catechism answer to it. It's unmerited favor. And I thought, Jesus was filled with grace. Was it unmerited? No. So, what is grace? And I think that word unmerited favor started back about Spurgeon. It's best I've been able to research it. But to me, grace is God's empowerment to be everything he's called you to be, and his power to do everything he's called you to do. So it's the empowerment of God to be and to do everything that he has designed you to be and to do. And part of that is walking in forgiveness, because if that other person is stepping over boundaries, if that other person has invaded your space, you need to walk in forgiveness for them. And the other part of that is true, not only granting forgiveness, but walking in forgiveness to them. It's a two-way street.
That's I think besides your conversion story, that might be the first time I heard you talk about God in the day-to-day life instead of just moving. Because I've heard God come up every time you move. But what about in the middle? Like, what about when you're there? What about in the day-to-day? What would you say to people who are struggling with their day-to-day life? God showing up in the day-to-day, or walking with God in the day-to-day life. Sounds like what you're saying about walking in forgiveness is part of that.
That's the last goal in my books. I have 6 goals. The last one is the prayer walk. My background's in communication. And when we have an idea, a thought or emotion, we want to communicate it to somebody, we package that. We deliver that message to the other person. I love you, or I apologize. It's that two-way street of communication. And we struggle with prayer. I think during the time we were at the church in Dallas, Fort Worth, and it was during the time when I telemarketed, the Lord started really teaching me about prayer, and especially around the Lord's Prayer. A lot of churches use that in their liturgy, Sunday after Sunday, quote the Lord's Prayer. Tanya and I, my wife and I, were watching a TV show the other day, and they were trying to have a spiritual moment. And so they started, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And I thought, that is the model prayer. The disciples were walking along, they observed Jesus in prayer, and they said, Lord, teach us to pray. And he said, pray like this. Well, there's these different points in that prayer. I think as a rabbi, as a teacher, and living with these disciples, I believe what he did is over a number of days say, this is this point, and spend some time talking about that point, and this point, and this point. I don't think it's a prayer that lasts 30 seconds, that he says, pray this way. It's a prayer that acknowledges who God is, worshiping him. It's a prayer saying, I have needs every day, my daily bread. I have problems in life, so lead me not into temptation. There's various aspects of that I think he spent over a period of time praying. So when we talk about being in a constant attitude of prayer, it's being in that constant communication with him. Lord, I thank you for this meal today. I thank you. I enjoy coffee. I know you enjoy coffee. We're going to have the guy that established my doctoral program in our home next weekend. He's already specified the type of coffee he wants. He makes his own coffee while he's here. It's like mud. Mine's not quite as thick as his, but we thank you, Lord, for coffee. Thank you, Lord, for and I'm looking forward to your podcast tomorrow. What's the coffee that's sponsoring you now? Hunter's Coffee.
Hunter's Blend Coffee.
Hunter's. We just put a little commercial in for them now. Okay, good. It's as we walk through life, we stub our toe. We don't pay much attention to that toe until we stub it, and at that moment. Say it's in the middle of the night, I've gotten up to go to the bathroom, I stub my toe. My whole focus is now on that toe. I am so sorry I stubbed you. But then I get up in the morning and I stick it in a sock and stick it in a shoe and go on my way. Last night in a conversation with a dear friend, we're talking about the body of Christ, the church. You might correct me on this, or one of your listeners. I don't think church is used in the New Testament. It's ecclesia, it's the gathering. But what is more frequent there is the body of Christ. The church today sees itself as a church. That's why I saw a headline this morning before we got on the air with each other. More and more churches, the pastors are leaving. More and more churches, the doors are closing, not just because of COVID, but they're not functional in our society anymore. That's because they see themselves as the church. If the church corporate started seeing itself as the body of Christ, then our purpose is totally changed. Then it's not about that upfront platform speaker or the staged event. It now becomes ministering to the people that sit in rows, looking at the back of each other's heads, that may show up on a Sunday morning or whenever they meet, and they have a need, but then they leave with the same need unmet because they've watched a staged event. And I think during those years, that's what God was teaching me, is to walk with him daily instead of having that staged entertainment event. And maybe that's why Tanya and I've struggled in some of our church relationships, is because we find people that are platform operators, that we don't understand the code, instead of walking with somebody with a personal relationship. And that's what God wants of us. He wants that personal relationship. That's why he sent his son to identify with us, so that he can say, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased.
Yeah, the stage thing, I think part of it is the nature of our faith is a scriptural book focused thing, right? And that requires some explication, right? You have to read it, you have to understand it. And the earliest synagogue service record that we have is in Luke 4, where Jesus takes the scroll of Isaiah. He goes up on the stage, as it were. That's where we get our stage stuff. It's from the synagogue. And it's from that early Jewish practice of reading the scriptures and praying. We've added, contemporary, it looks like a rock concert now, which I don't like. And we don't have that at our church. We couldn't take it anymore. We just, there's a lot of seeker sensitive churches. They call them seeker sensitive. We are at a finder sensitive church, which is what happens after, and so how do you grow your faith? And that's exactly what we're growing through right now, is that our church is dying. It feels like it's dying because of finances, and we may lose our space. And a lot of this had to do with the pandemic.
Yes.
And, yeah, so we're trying to figure, but we have a homeless ministry. So that when you said about ministering to people with their needs, I immediately thought of our homeless ministry, which is a major focus of our church. And that really, I'm actually quite proud of that, because we run the homeless ministry in this area, and the way we run it, the lady that runs it is Marcia. Her name is Marcia. Her deal is people, not programs. And so just being with the homeless. Yes, you're running a program. Yes, but the whole point, and that's the point of the stage thing too, is it's supposed to facilitate the life of the body, like you're saying, right? The life of the body of Christ, reaching out and meeting needs, spiritual, and probably you can't meet spiritual needs absent the body totally. You can't do it, so, and there's so many people on the streets for various reasons. And so, Marcia had it in her, we meet at the First Methodist, church. We meet in their parking lot, and we just have a time where we try to meet needs. So and they're simple needs, lotion, socks, toothpaste, toothbrush, little handheld mirrors, and we had a laundry shower ministry where we had a trailer where they could take a shower and they could do laundry, and that was stolen last year. It was parked at the first EV Free Fullerton, which is Chuck Swindoll's church. It was parked there and it was stolen. I don't know how much it costs to replace it, but we just don't have the money. If you're watching this and you want to meet that need, then you go to thevineoc.com and give to that, and put a message there that it's for replacing a laundry shower trailer, because it will go right to meeting the needs of the homeless people, I promise you. Anyway, but yeah, all that to, there's a lot that was there.
See, I think that's something that shortly after I became a Christian, I became aware that we look inside. We come to that place of meeting and we look inside, and that's where we operate. But what Jesus did is he focused out. He went among the people. And that's what the people were looking for in that time of Roman rule. is looking for a general. And wow, here comes a guy on the scene that can raise the dead, heal the sick, feed the multitudes. What a perfect general. No, 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 no. That's not what my kingdom's about. It's a different kingdom. It's a kingdom that will eventually establish an operation in Southern California that Luke's talking about, where people can come and shower, where people can come and wash their clothes. They can get a sandwich. It's like the Hispanic woman you were talking about that would come in and get the hot water and get the tea and tell you about the Lutheran pancake breakfast, not knowing that you were on security at the church. It's not.
Yeah, I looked homeless.
Yeah, I love that story. And you've got to write the book that God's giving you. You're such an awesome writer. I've introduced you to other people, and some of the conversations, the way you do the narratives, all. I am stiff as a writer. I don't flow. I'm too simple. You're a master.
Thank you. I'll take any compliment I get.
Well,
thank you.
I tell you what Lance Wallnau told me: write the book, write the book, write the book God's given you. Took me 25 years. You can do it quicker.
Now you have written books, and so you finally took Lance's advice?
Finally did.
I think you just gave us the title for this podcast, this episode, Write the Book That God Gives You.
There you go.
Tell us about your book.
Okay.
Your books. Yeah, actually, I got 2 here. So
I need to send you number 3. It just got published this week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Two events clicked these, actually 3. Once, Lance told me about 25 years ago, write the book. I've done a lot of radio, TV, film writing, did my doctoral thesis years ago, but didn't sit down to write something that you can hold in your hand as you're doing now. And last spring, about a year ago, pastor at our church, executive pastor, asked me to speak on goal setting. We have a school of ministry at our church. It's discipleship training. It's part of 3,000 schools worldwide, part of Global Ministries and Relief Incorporated. It's headed up by Dr. Leon Ruin from South Africa in Tampa. So we became one of his 3,000 schools. He also has a granting program, correspondence, associates, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate. 4 years ago, I enrolled in the program. Well, last spring, our executive pastor asked me to speak on goal setting preparation for our fall semester in the School of Ministry. I started going through all of my stuff on goal setting and came across a statement that comes from a mountain climber by the name of George Mallory, one of the first to try to scale Mount Everest. And he was asked, why do you want to climb Everest? And he said, because it's there. And that stuck in my mind. So I started researching Everest. It just triggered an interest. I watched some documentaries. Then I saw this as fitting an analogy for achieving goals. So climbing Mount Everest became the first part, and I ended up not doing one big book, but 3 smaller books, 4 parts. The base camp, which sits at 17,000 feet, higher than most mountains in Europe. Well, what is our base camp in the church? Well, it's salvation, and it's baptism, communion. That's part 1. And I did this in these smaller format books because I saw a lot of Christian books were 6 by 9 inch, about 100 pages. Book 3 is 160 pages. I started working on that message and doing more research than I needed for a 30 to 40-minute message. Dr. Leon was here in our home last August, getting ready to speak in our kickoff our fall semester in the School of Ministry. He said, what do you have left on your doctorate? And I told him I'd already written 1 paper for him on preaching and teaching. And it was based off of Table Talk by Luther. I don't know if you've ever gotten into Table Talk stuff by Martin Luther. Interesting concept. Anyway, he said, what do you have left? And I told him, he said, why don't you write that book that you've been talking about? Let's just count it finished. Well, I still had a few hours left on the doctorate. But I took all of my notes and started working 6 months ago on doing these 3 books. And so now have all 3 of them finished. COVID hit in January. I didn't meet my goal by the end of January, but I did have it published, book 3 last week. It has 4 parts. Part 1 is base camp. Part 2 is ascending the mountain, getting up the mountain, which is the challenge for most people. Then part 3 is in the, you don't have that in your hand, I'll have that to you soon, is descending the mountain. What happens, most people that get to the top that end up dying, and there's been over 300 deaths on the mountain, 0.4%, 0.4% deaths on the mountain. You enter the death zone. And at the top of the mountain where that death zone is, your cells, your body's consuming itself. You can't breathe. You've had to acclimate yourself to even get to that far. And most people that die coming down because they've run out of steam. They've used everything to get to the top. Then what's left? So descending the mountain to me is where we have to, Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me. The cross is a sign of death, dying to self so that he might be everything he's called us to be. Dying to self, my own goals, my own aspirations, so that he can live his life through me. He says in Jeremiah, for I know the plans I have for you. They're good plans. That not that you're a failure, but that you might be successful, that you might achieve what I have designed you to achieve, your proper purpose. I don't want to use this computer that we're talking on as a bookend. I want to use it for what it's designed. We're designed for a purpose. So it's going down that mountain. I need to die to who I am so that he might be everything he wants to be in my life. Going up the mountain.
Can you give an example of that? Can you give an example of dying to yourself so that he can be everything?
I think it's everything we've talked about today. Being that department chair, having a desire to be a university president when he's no, that's not my goal for you. Being a vice president, insurance investment. No, let's set that aside. You were pursuing a dream of financial rewards and doing all these things financially, like some of the guys in our business that had their own airplanes and their mansions and all that. No, that's not what I've designed you for. And so as I start putting aside who I am so that he might be everything he is, then all of a sudden, what Graham Cook told us in Alaska, that I was going to be heading up a ministry school. Why did it take 25 years? Well, I asked him over breakfast in Arlington, Texas one time. I said, Graham, you said that in Alaska. It didn't happen. Why? He said, you need a church that will accept the vision that I've given you. God has shown me what God has given you. You need a church that will embrace that. We're in a church now that has embraced that. They've embraced us coming out of the wilderness and said, we have been praying for you for 10 years. Well, I had been praying for them for 25 years. So now we're joined together and we have the School of Ministry. We're looking at doing more and more out into the community. There's a huge homeless population in the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico. There is such a crime, concentration of crime here. Murders are rampant. The homeless, the police that have quit, just quit, walked away. We have a city that's nearly dysfunctional. Well, what do? Well, the church has been placed within the communities to bring life and to bring it more abundantly. So we're a little lighthouse doing that and trying to spark something that we can.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure, please do.
Are you planning on moving or are you going to stay there?
Moving.
Because after all the things you just said, that would be a reason to stay.
Well,
no? Not, I mean, I know there's a lot of Democrats there. That's
All
why
right.
it's all messed up.
He- God parked us at another church for a year here in town. We didn't know why. We sold our home in Abilene, Texas, moved here, and
You
some
feel
of us didn't want-
discontent there?
huh?
You feel discontent again?
Actually, pretty content. But when we were at other church, and we didn't put your hands together like that. Put your hands together. What thumb is on top? Which of your thumbs is on top? Mine's my right thumb.
You want me to do a thumb on top?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay. So your left thumb is on top?
Yeah.
My right thumb is on top. What does that mean? Nothing.
It symbolizes California. The left hand is on top.
There you go.
The left thumb is on top,
But
keeping the right one down.
But if I interlace them the other way, it doesn't fit. Well, we were in another church and we didn't fit.
Okay.
Okay. So God, what's next? And
Was this the church that was praying for you for 10 years?
No. This
Oh,
we're
okay.
in now is.
Oh,
The other one we didn't coalesce. We were
okay. Well, wait, so they've been praying for you for 10 years. Why do you want to leave?
we've established what we were sent here to do.
Okay.
And now it's time to
You got a
pass
different mission?
Yep, pass the baton to the next person. And mine has moved now into more writing. And from that, and I have a website, spiritual wanderings with an s.com. There's a dash.
Okay, we'll link that in the description.
Okay, spiritual wanderings.com. And I'm doing more itinerant work. The fellow I'm working with, Dr. Leon, is he's internationally known. He's planted churches all over the globe. As I said, he has 3,000 schools of ministry worldwide, and I see us doing more stuff together. And he's just started this year a leadership training program, spiritual leadership training, that's pretty intensive, a 50-week course. And I see myself working with him, curriculum design, and not sure exactly what it is, but he'll visit here next week for 4 days, and we'll explore some of those options. I asked my wife when we left the last church, a counselor who I greatly respect said, Paul, Tanya has followed you all over the globe. It's her turn. Have her pray where you're going to locate, and from there you can write and teach. And so I told her that, and she said, Hill Country of Texas. So we don't know if it'll actually be the Hill Country, but it'll be someplace back in Texas.
Sounds like she wants to go back to where you originally were.
That's it.
Yeah.
I yanked her up long enough. She's ready.
She didn't want to go originally, right?
She's like a horse. When you release them, they want to go back to the barn.
Well, I hope that she gets that house back if she wants it.
Yeah, probably not there.
All right. Well, how would you summarize? We don't have we have a couple minutes left. How would you summarize what you've learned in your life?
Be flexible. Don't get so stiff and stuck in something that you can't. Still have a goal, still explore your options, still fulfill your purpose in life, whatever that is. And our purpose can change. And I think it's being open to doing that. It's excitement, being open to the excitement that God has for us.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Dr. Paul Potter, Ph.D., D-Min. I can't believe they named the spiritual degree Demon, but hey, that's me. But yeah, we really appreciated you sharing your life stories with us. You've been, it seems like, everywhere in the United States, and you have so much that you could share with people. We really appreciate you coming on. And I'll link your books. Are they on your website?
They are on the website.
Okay. Tell us again the website.
spiritual-wanderings.com.
.com. Okay, we'll link that up and I'll make sure it's the right website before I link it up.
All right. Well, Dr. Mather, thank you.
Until next time, sir.
God bless.
God bless.
Bye-bye.